Welcome to the More Than OK podcast, a wellbeing and family podcast about tips, strategies and stories on how to be more than okay. My name is Belinda Bray. I'm a mum, a wife, a teacher, and someone who's always trying to be more than okay. I love learning about wellness and wellbeing, and I love bringing what I learn into my life, my family, and my classroom. So I hope what I have for you today is helpful and inspires you to be more than okay. Today I have with me a special guest, Amy Humphrey.
Hello.
Welcome. So Amy is a primary teacher at our school, but she's also a mum and she's also someone who just loves people. So thanks for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
It's great. So just to get to know you a little bit better, I have some quick fire questions for any guest who comes here. Okay, first, most important, what is your coffee order?
Long black, dash of milk.
Okay.
Nice and easy.
What is your favourite holiday destination?
I love New Zealand, and we've been there lots with the kids while they were little, but if I had to pick, it would be Germany. Yep.
Okay, what is your favourite thing about working in a school?
Oh, wow. So in a school is being with the kids, the relationships, getting to know the children in our class, but particularly in our school, I love that culture, the vibe, the family feel that we have. That's second to none. It's amazing.
Excellent. I have a question though. I'd like to know where you find all your earrings.
Well, originally I got them from, there's a designer in Melbourne called Mazda Valia, and she does amazing earrings. But since I've been wearing, I think these are some of hers that I've got on today, but since I've been wearing them, everyone buys me pretty earrings. So now I get pretty earrings from everywhere because people know that I love them. So yeah.
It's kind of your trademark now.
Yeah, I love it. Bit of bling.
Yes. So the big question we're looking at for this podcast is how to help families deal with anxiety. And the events of this year have seen lots of people anxious. And so I'm hoping that this is really helpful. Now, Amy, you and I have actually had lots of chats about the events of this year, and especially parts of isolation and how much we actually really quite liked it.
Loved it.
So, yeah, what sort of things?
I think for me, at the start of that isolation period, there was so much fear, there was so much change. And being a social person, I really struggled with that. I struggled with the pulling back and everything closing down and everything shutting down. And I actually had a few nights where I just had a few tears with Carl and just said how much I was going to miss our life. But that actually didn't last too long. And I think we got into a couple of weeks into isolation, and all of our family, one of our love languages is quality time. So we all actually really enjoy spending time together, and to be given the space and the time to actually do that and do it really well, and having no other choice but to be together and enjoy each other's company, that was really big for us. So we came into that time, I came into that time feeling a little bit, but actually feeling like it gave us what we needed as a family. So it was really good.
That's really great. And so our family was the same. We quite liked the change in routine and the time we could spend together. And we really learnt how to be a family better, which was something you'd never learn at any other time. So we saw that as a really precious thing. But there's lots of families who didn't cope. And you and I are similar in that I think we can spot those kids that are struggling and coming back into school. Not everyone survived isolation as well as we did. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that with you.
Definitely.
So I'd like to break this podcast into three sections. So firstly, we'll talk about what is anxiety. Then we'll look at what anxiety looks like. And then thirdly, some tips on how to help families cope with someone in their family if they have anxiety. All right, so firstly, I talk about anxiety a lot with kids, and this is how I explain it. So imagine that your brain is like your fist and wrist, and there are three parts that are involved in anxiety. So you have your brain stem at the back, and this is like your animal brain, your reptilian brain, and this is where fight and flight happens, right down in the base of our skull. The second part of our brain is called the neocortex, and that's where all our emotions and reactions happen. And then the front of our brain is the frontal cortex, and this is where we do all our reasoning and processing. So a normal healthy brain uses all of the parts of the brain equally, and we usually don't go into fight or flight. However, if someone is anxious, an event causes them to feel anxious. So imagine you've seen a snake, or you're being chased by a bear, or something like that. Your natural instinct is to respond, to get out of there. So your brain just dips, your processing dips into your brainstem, and you're just fight or flighting. Your frontal lobe doesn't come into it, and your emotions have read the situation and said danger, 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 and you have to get out. So that's what normally happens. So if we see a danger, we have wiring in our brain to get us out of there. But when we have situations that are just more normal everyday things and they cause that response, that is what anxiety is. Does that?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you totally there. You can have those significant life events where you can see along the line things that happen in your life that can be triggers for anxiety. You have a look at little tiny kindy children and that separation anxiety that they experience when they're saying goodbye to their parents. There's things like the loss of a family member. There is, family breakdowns. There can be abuse. There can be stresses in high school. I mean, you would see this in high school students all the time. That workload increases and there's that period of stress or anxiety related around that. But I think what you said is true. It's when you see that for a prolonged period of time, or when you see that occurring without that significant life event. If you're seeing someone that's really anxious, and it is for a prolonged period of time, or it is without a big event, then it's definitely something to look into.
Yeah, true. And so when I asked you to do this podcast with me, I kind of knew that you'd go away and do some homework.
Yeah.
And so I know that you've actually gone and researched some of the causes of anxiety.
Yep.
So do you want to share what you've learnt?
Yeah, sure. We've covered, a big life event, something that happens that can really cause a switch in a person emotionally that can lead to anxiety. The other thing to consider is that if you are a parent and you yourself struggle with anxiety, there's a fair chance that your child has a genetic predisposition to actually suffer from anxiety as well. Yeah. In a lot of ways that's great as a parent because you can be on the lookout for your child, and maybe some of the triggers that trigger you or some of those emotions that you feel you can look out for in your child. In the same sort of instance, it can be a bit of a learned behaviour as well. So if a child is at home with an anxious family member, or they are around someone that's anxious, sometimes they can pick up on those emotions as well and start reacting in an anxious way, whether they mean to or not. So you would see this often in high school students. We actually see it a lot in grade 6, which is the year that I'm teaching, when children start to experience that physical change, when they're starting to go through puberty, heading into adolescence. It can wreak havoc on their brain chemistry as well. Yeah. So anyone who's had a teenager knows that they start to change, but also they start to feel emotions that they haven't felt before. Yes. They start to see hormone surges. So be on the lookout for that as well if you do have a child going through that time, as that can often be a trigger to them experiencing anxiety as well. So great. Yeah. So as a teacher, what sort of things do you look for, or what are the red flags that you may be experiencing a student who's got anxiety? Yeah, there can be a full range. For some kids it's really subtle, and it might be just that they're withdrawing from you in the classroom, or you find out from their parent that they're not eating lunch, or that they're not wanting to come to school, whether it be, for all sorts of different reasons. Yeah. But then it can be more obvious. It can be feeling sick in the stomach. It can be tears. And it can be, just being really upset over small things at school. You start to see those things come out. Oh, I thought I'd have a different list for secondary, but I think that's the same. I think it's kids. And I think it's nearly the same for adults as well. I know, I've spoken to lots of different people that have anxiety, and the first thing they do is just withdraw. It's that, really not wanting to be around other people, not sure how to handle those situations. Yeah. So it's that whole avoiding the fight and flight thing. Yeah, definitely. So just trying to avoid it. Okay, so we have covered
what is anxiety and how it affects the brain, and we've looked at some signs and symptoms to look for. So the last part of this is how we can help those students of ours or members of your family who are struggling with anxiety. So what are some things that you do?
I think it's really important to recognise what the person is feeling. Definitely don't make them feel foolish or like they're overreacting. So the ways that you can do that are just supporting them through that time emotionally. So staying calm, encouraging them to take deep breaths, or finding something to distract their brain during that time. So chatting about something different, fresh air is always great, or going out and having a look at the garden or go for a walk is also really good. I don't know, do you have any other things?
Well, they're the sorts of things that I was going to mention too. So when children are anxious and it is becoming overwhelming, we actually need to bring them back to the here and now. Because usually their mind is spinning off to the past, or it's spinning off worrying about the future. So anything that grounds them in the here and now. So fresh air, outside. I do a lot of walking with students. Just change where they're at. Just give them a fresh perspective. Those things are super helpful. And they're just little things, but they can actually just maybe stop it from getting worse.
Yeah, and can I add, like at a school like Highlands, we something we do is that we pray with the students, and that makes a big difference. We can pray for them and we can pray with them. And that's something we like to do just to help with that calming down and staying positive and looking away from the situation that they're currently in.
That's great.
Yeah.
So part of this podcast, I like to make sure that we give some really practical tips on how we can help our families understand anxiety. So do you have any? And then I'll add mine.
I do. A really big thing is we can't always remove the triggers that cause anxiety. And as much as we would like to remove ourselves from the situations that give us anxiety, we can't always do that. So in a lot of ways, it's about managing and having almost like a little toolkit of how you're going to deal with that situation should it come up again. So I think a really important thing is when you're in a moment when you're not anxious, I think it's really hard to rationalise, it's really hard to plan ahead when you're stuck in anxiety. But in a moment when you're not, and at a time when you're really at peace, I think it's helpful to give yourself some strategies, speak to someone or do some research, and find some strategies that will help you to get out of that time when you're in it. So doing that almost like little baby steps to help yourself work out, okay, next time this happens, next time I feel anxiety coming on, I've already got some strategies in mind that I can use to help me get out of that. And I definitely think it's really important, like I said before, to validate that what the person is feeling is genuine, and to them, the feelings that they're having are not just emotional, but they're also physical. So it can have a really strong effect on you physically. So just making them understand that you're there for them and you can see that they're feeling that, and it is genuine. That's a really important thing.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So the Bible tells us to cast all our burdens onto God, and He will take care of it. And my experience is He really does. So you can draw so much peace and comfort just from being centered in God and just knowing that He's there for you and He will help you get through those really tough times. So in my own personal life, there have been times when I have struggled with anxiety. I have just found it really hard to contain my thoughts and to be centered and to just let my frontal lobe do what it needs to do. But I'm just so grateful that I have a faith in God and that I have a Bible that's a really great toolbox in helping me navigate my way through that.
Yeah, I have to agree. Times in my life when I have felt anxious, I've really found that it's hard to not focus on the fear. It's hard to not focus on what is making you anxious. But when you can pull yourself away from that, and when you can focus on the goodness of God, when you can focus on His promises and His promises for a future for you, when you can focus on His word, it really does draw you away from that fear and give you a peace that is above all. Yeah, it's good, hey? Yeah, it's great. Well, thank you for coming in today, Amy. Thanks for inviting me. It's always better with a guest. It's always much more fun. But thanks for your wisdom and for your insights into this topic. And we really hope that this is useful for you. So if you have any topics you would like us to discuss or you'd like to learn more about, please get in touch because we want you to be more than okay.